Given away $75,000. Just because they set it on, it can be back, squeezed back because next week.
I've had some.
We'll answer that.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Tableland Regional Council Ordinary Meeting for June 2022. Do we have any apologies? No, thank you. Can I just remind everyone to make sure their devices are turned off? Could I ask everyone to stand, please? I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we meet on today and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also, while we're standing, we'll observe a minute's silence as a mark of respect for those residents who have passed away during the previous month. Thank you very much. Item number 6, declaration of any material personal interest, conflicts of interest by councillors or senior council officers. Councillor Hodge.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll have a prescribed conflict of interest in regards to 13.2, the Tiger Historical Society. As my father-in-law, Richard Bailey, is a member of the executive committee, so I'll lead the meeting for the debate and the vote.
Thanks, Councillor Hodge. Any other declarations, councillors or officers? Thank you. Item 7, the minutes of the Tableland Regional Council May meeting. Can we have a mover of those minutes? Councillor Bilney moving the minutes. Councillor Hayden seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Business arising. Was there any business arising there, Jackie? No. Okay. Councillors, any business arising from the floor from those minutes of May? No, thank you. We'll move along to 11.1. Investment incentive policy. Could I have a mover that the report be open for discussion? Councillor Cardew is moving that it's open for discussion. A seconder. Councillor Hodge seconding. Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. With this policy, I don't support it
in its current form, and I want to propose an alternate motion to have this left on the table, and also to review the methodology of applying infrastructure charges on development approvals. I think it's out of the infrastructure charges, in my view, are out of whack, especially when we talk about large warehouse type development. The infrastructure charges, the way it's worked out, the infrastructure charges are very onerous on developers for big warehouse type scenarios, etc. So, and also the fact that we're throwing the housing, medium density housing scenario into the mix as well. In my view, it complicates matters. The way I read this policy is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the minimum amount of development is $5 million under this policy, in order to be able to attract some sort of relief in infrastructure charges. Especially with medium density housing, during my time as a certifier, building certifier with council, I can't recall any instance where we've approved a housing development anywhere near $5 million. So the intent of the policy is to give incentive to developers, especially with housing, to construct housing, because as we are all aware, there's a critical housing shortage statewide and Australia-wide, and certainly within our TRC local government area. So I think we really need to revisit the policy, look at it in more detail, and also, while doing that, I think we also need to look at how our infrastructure charges are applied across the board, and then develop an incentive policy once we get our infrastructure charges right. So I'm proposing the alternate motion as on the screen.
Councillors? Councillor Hodge?
I think we need, can we go to our officer to get a better explanation of it?
Yes, because I don't believe everything Councillor Cardew said there was accurate regarding the $5 million threshold. So yeah, I'll pass over to the officer.
Through the chair. The three target focuses under the policy: medium density housing, strategically important industries, and catalytic projects. The only criteria that's required to satisfy the $5 million is major catalytic projects. The other two target areas, medium density housing and strategically important industries, are on any developments, any scale of developments for those particular two focus areas. So if someone was to build a triplex and their infrastructure charges were $40,000 and they were eligible under the policy, then those charges would be waived. So the only criteria that stipulates needs to be a $5 million threshold is for those projects that aren't strategic industries, so don't really align with council's corporate plan or economic development strategy, sit outside that, but we still want to be able to support those projects. To let everyone know, the council, the Tablelands Regional Council, is open for business and actively looking to bring business into the Tablelands Regional Council, but the other two areas don't require that threshold of hold of $5 million. They just need to meet the eligibility criteria, and then they would be eligible for discounts that could range from $40,000 up to $100,000 or whatever the figure is.
Can I just also add, Mr. Mayor, in relation to the calculation of headworks more generally, we do recognise that there's some developments that are now being proposed that perhaps the infrastructure charges plan does not or did not envisage at the time, but that's quite a process to amend that, and we seek to work through that by having agreements, infrastructure agreements in place in relation to particular developments where it's required, as opposed to trying to fit everything into this one policy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, there's probably 2 points here. For officers to work with a policy, it's got to be straightforward. So they've got to be able to say, right, yes, maximum is $100,000. They can't go over that under this policy. Now, if I put something hypothetical up, right, say there was a big development, say for the Peninsula Yungaburra, a very huge one, right, and the infrastructure charges were, you know, $3 or $4 million. Therefore, under that scenario, officers would come to council with a infrastructure agreement, and is that? I think that is the case.
Yeah, generally. Yeah.
In general terms. So.
Yeah, that's great. And if there were circumstances where they seek to negotiate the different infrastructure charges for particular reasons, then those conversations would take place prior to that coming to council. The infrastructure agreement needs to be adopted by council before any planning approvals are given.
Councillor Bilden?
Yeah, through the chair. I have reread this policy a few times, and it does state that it's intended to incentivise medium density dwellings, the development of strategically important industries, and the attraction of major catalytic projects. I hold a fairly firm belief that where this is actually targeted is the medium density area, due to the real lack of stock currently available and what's been an absence in the past. So going on from what Councillor Hodge said, for those larger applications by corporates or the like, I would have thought that their applications would probably come to council in any case due to possible complexities, but also if they were requesting waivers or some sort of agreements from what the application may state, it would come to council for consideration. So for me, I think it's more to do with the medium density stuff. Yeah. So I actually think from having nothing, this is a really good process. If it's not hitting the mark, we have the ability to relook at it at a later date if it's not generating what it's intended to. So, yeah.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Bilney. Councillors? Yes, look, I agree with Councillor Bilney. Look, this is a really good first crack at a policy to turn some things around. We've certainly got to focus on housing, but you know, there's scope within this policy for developments outside housing. You know, and for a fairly large developer coming to council, you know, if they meet the criteria and if their infrastructure charges were $1 million, well, according to this policy, they've immediately got a 10% discount, you know, with this policy. If they wanted to come back and argue for some greater discount, well, they're welcome to do that, and it would come to a council meeting to deal with it. But this is a great starting point. It's signalling our intent as a council to get development happening, certainly in particular areas. Yeah, I commend the work that's been done on this one. Councillor Picton.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Angelo, could you just confirm to me that the application of this policy, as you see it, do you see it as being restrictive, or is it able to accommodate any special circumstance that might arise? In other words, do you see this limiting applicants bringing forward matters to council for deliberation? It's not you don't see it as a policy which restricts council decision making?
No, I think through the chair, I think it'll unlock development. I think, as the Mayor mentioned, if there was a significant project, then council have the ability to assess that they wanted to independently of this policy. But I think what this policy will do is provide clarity to local industry, clarity to developers, and hopefully unlock a lot of development that might have been marginal with the costs of inputs rising. Potentially this might bring forward projects as well. With the major projects coming offline later this year, the road works between Mareeba and Atherton and the hospital, it's important that council consider how we can continue that construction pipeline. And this policy hopefully will go some way towards making sure that pipeline's there for the future, and we not only create jobs but retain the jobs we've got as well.
Councillor Billman.
Yeah, through the chair again. Just want some clarification of one thing that in the report it states on page 7, the policy requires that during construction, preference is to be given to the use of local workforce, including contractors and tradespeople, and local suppliers of goods, materials and equipment. Now, I think that's fantastic that that's a requirement, but I'm just keen to find out how is it going to be measured and controlled, or acquitted if we like.
Yep, through the chair. So that will be self-reporting through my consultation as part of this policy development work. Industry has indicated they already do preference local workforce and local supplies. So the intent would be that they self-report on this without having to put the onerous burden on them to report to council on where they got their supplies and workforce from.
Thanks, Angela.
Councillors, do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wills is moving the officer's recommendation. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hayden is seconding. Any more discussion on that, councillors? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carry. Would you like that report? Yes, please. You could report that again. Carry. Thank you. Item 12.1. J.E. Disley negotiated decision notice MCU non-resident workforce and rural workers accommodation 601 Channel Road, Walkerman. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Cardew. And a seconder. Councillor Wills. Councillor Cardew.
Just a point of order, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to foreshadow that I may move an amendment to this after the discussion.
Okay. Councillor Cardew.
No, I don't have any further comment.
Councillor Wills.
No, extensive report. I'm happy with that.
Councillors, anyone like to talk to this? Councillor Hodge.
Okay. Thanks very much. I'd just like to start, when this application came to council, I just want to ask Paul, I'll try and be nice today, Paul, since your last meeting with us. So,
Thanks, Councillor.
anyway, the proposal was for a material change of use for non-residential workforce accommodation and rural workers accommodation, in brackets 194 additional persons. I'd like to work backwards. There's 3 parts to this negotiation decision. I'd like to go to condition 5, the extra payment condition, on page 24. Now, I'm sure you'll have an explanation, but I don't think I've ever seen, since I've been tied up in council for many years, where we've put a condition on accommodation where it defines nationalities, whether you're from Pacific Islands, whether you're from Sweden, England, wherever. My question is, on the first part where it says the reason why one of the reasons why you want to delete or you're agreeing with the applicant is that because it's going to use DFAT specific Australia labour mobility. Now, I understand that. They've been around for a fair while and they're saying they don't drive cars. Well, I disagree with that. I see them driving everywhere. Would you be able to tell me on the 12th of October this year, who will be there? Will it be DFAT or could it be, Swedish backpackers driving second-hand Volvos? So that's the question. The question I'm pointing to you is,
Yeah.
Look,
Councillor Hodge, you don't need to, you can make your point without asking a question that no one could possibly answer. So look,
that's the
you
point.
can
That's the
make your
point.
point.
Yeah, that's the point, Mr. Mayor. That's the point.
We understand the point. You don't need to address it to an officer.
Anyway.
Point taken.
So that's the main thing. So, and still, of course, with infrastructure charges and under the Act where this comes under an extra payment condition. So if you'd like to explain to the councillors why would we give $75,000 worth of infrastructure agreement when we don't really know? It's for accommodation workers, rural accommodation, not necessarily DFATs, but it could be anybody. So that's the question.
So maybe if I may through the chair. So at the time of writing this report, we were unsure if the incentive policy that you've just resolved was going to be tabled at this council meeting, and or if it was to be tabled, if it was going to be adopted by council. So we couldn't actually in this report refer to the policy because there was a chance that it didn't exist at this point in time. But it was the officer's understanding while writing this report that this development would fit the criteria of essential industries to support the application of the policy. So we've basically applied the assumption that the policy would be adopted and that this would fit those criteria, and therefore we're recommending to apply this removal of the extra payment charges.
Well, that report came back some months ago, I think, wasn't it? When did this come to council? It was months ago, probably 2 months, 3 months ago. And this report, we only workshopped this report a month ago. So I understand what you're saying.
So just for clarity.
Come to council question after March.
Just for clarity, so the development approval report that went to council was resolved. This is a subsequent request from the developer to negotiate the conditions which they are entitled to do under the Planning Act. So this is a subsequent report that purely deals with the negotiation of some of the conditions that council endorsed previously. Obviously we then have new information that we consider to provide recommendations for this report.
Councillor question?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm not sure that I could ask Mark or perhaps the CEO. Are you suggesting that it's appropriate to apply this? I don't recall in the incentive policy indicating that we were going to apply it retrospectively. This application, this decision was made some time ago. All the council have agreed it was passed. Now they've sought to change it on the basis of a new policy that didn't exist until today. I'm confused as to how this relationship works.
No, they haven't sought to change it on the policy that didn't exist. They've asked for consideration around that, and in arriving at a position, we have taken account of council's deliberations through a workshop process in working up the developer incentive policy. So if the application was to be received now, it would be able to be considered under that policy. Given that they've made a specific request, we've looked at council's documentation, thought processes, if you will, to arrive at a position where we could make a recommendation around the applicant's request for relief in that section and being guided by that.
I understand where you're coming from, but does that mean everyone who the month before can come back now and start asking us for stuff?
If
The
they-
policy that was passed today goes from the 1st of July 22.
It's not being approved under the policy. It's being approved under the negotiated decision notice. We've taken guidance from council's thinking around that. So if we get another request for a negotiated decision notice, we will reflect council's decision making around that. If that decision making is that we're not going to do it for application that didn't exist as a consequence of this consideration, then clearly we wouldn't come back and recommend the same as this.
I'm satisfied with the response, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor Cook. Councillors?
I intend to move a motion if I can get a seconder. That number 5 not be deleted, if I can get a seconder.
So your amendment would be to
Not include number 5.
condition 5.
Yes. It would start.
So if we can just get that up on the screen, Jackie, so that we can read it, please.
Condition 5 is not deleted.
Yes, and that would be D. Where it says in the officer's recommendation, D, condition 5, extra payment of decision notice dated 30 March 2022, delete that, delete that clause, please. You know,
Or take it out completely, or just put be not deleted.
well, you can put, to make it,
It would be deleted and 5.3 forward would be renumbered. How we deal with it structurally? That makes sense. Just be removed from the list of clauses to be deleted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got an amendment from councillor Hodge, a proposed amendment. Councillor Hodge is looking for a seconder for the amendment. Do we have a seconder? We don't have a seconder, councillor Hodge.
that means it left it, fine.
We do have a motion on the table. Motion moved by councillor Cardew, seconded by councillor Wilkes, to support the officer's recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. Councillor Hodge, would you
Yes, please.
like that recorded? Thanks, Chair. Item 12.2, supply of cleaning services, public amenities. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillors, do we have a mover?
Yep.
Councillor Building and seconded councillor Hodge. Councillor Building?
I think the report's very inclusive and we do need to clean our facilities.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Hodge?
No, it's fine. This goes for 12 months, but the council has the option to continue it for another 12 months. That's the case.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah. Any questions for the council officer? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thank you. Item 12.3, the extension of traffic control services. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilkes moving, seconder. Councillor Hayden, thank you. Councillor Wilkes?
No, fairly comprehensive report. Traffic control and the responsibilities associated are an expert field now. And, yeah, it's got to be done by the right people in accordance with all the current regulations and legislation, so I'm happy with it, happy to recommend it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. (13.1) Financial Report, May 2022. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge and Councillor Clifton. Councillor Hodge?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's great to see that we are tracking to budget, which is really good. With our new budget coming up this time next week. So this is good. There's two questions I wanted to ask was about the various contracts. The officers in. Thanks, Jeff. You did give me the explanation, but just for the record, if you'd just like to explain those two variations to contracts. The first one being RO Industries, which is for a 37% increase, and the second one is Durac, which is an 18% increase.
Okay. So through the chair, with respect to Arrow, they've been our project manager on the Merrygillan Bridge replacement project. That project has had some challenges with the approach roadworks. So that took a bit of extra time and effort to resolve. We also had a fairly large, significant public meeting out there with residents, which the consultant came along to as well. So there's some additional costs there, and there has been some delays with getting the project completed with wet weather. So the variation is to essentially accommodate those extra works and be able to get the project finished. The second one for
Can I just stop there?
Yep, sorry.
You know, Mike, when these people put in the contract price, right,
Yep.
One would think that they'd have a variation of their own contract to say for things that maybe not quite go right. What
Sorry.
we normally call a FAD.
But, sorry, just for clarity, are we talking about the consultant or the construction contractor?
Consultant, first one.
Right, okay, yep. Yep. So the quote or the pricing was done on hourly rate. Because we couldn't at the time, when we put the quote out, we couldn't quantify exactly how long the job was going to go for, how much was going to be involved in it. Things like wet weather and issues that come up through the course of the project. So it was actually done on an hourly rate. So essentially they get paid for the work that's required to be able to manage and administer the project.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the second one is actually for Durac, the construction of the two intersections at Tolga, which were 50-50 funded by HPSPP. There was, again, we struck some issues on that job with the causeway, and then the worst one, or the one that was probably the most costly to us and unexpected, was the subgrade conditions where we widened Beantree Road opposite the Barston Road intersection. When they opened that up, they found that it was very mushy underneath and we basically couldn't build the asphalt pavement over it, so we had to do some work there. There was also a couple of extra bits of asphalt that required replacement. One was in one of the intersections, but the other one was abutting the intersection, so that one was outside the original scope of works, but we took the opportunity to do the work while we had a contractor there and available. Those, the cost for those works will end up going against a different program because it wasn't part of the original scope. But essentially the additional cost is with extra works that weren't anticipated.
Okay, thanks for your explanation.
Councillor Clifton.
Thanks, Mayor. And whilst you're there, Mr. Blackie, orders raised against non-local suppliers. This is not a non-local supplier question, but I note that ARO Industries has been working on Tinnaburra Drive to the tune of $16,000. Tibooburra Drive is adjacent between, in the middle of, the Rankin development. Had we made no allowance in our original proposals that they would rebuild that drive? How does it work?
Sorry, councillor, that's not actually a project or a activity that I'm part of or familiar with, so I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Is there someone?
We'll probably have to take that question on notice because I'm not across what that relates to at this point in time. So I'll have to get back to you at a later stage.
There is a rebuilding of Tibooburra Drive at the moment, either side of the Rankin developments. I have assumed, in observing it, that that rebuilding of that road would have been built into the arrangements we have with Rankin.
My understanding, but without going back into the development approval, that they have a requirement to widen the road on the side of the development, not to rebuild the whole road. But I'm not sure what Arrow has been engaged for specifically here. So I'll have to take that on notice.
We'll give them a choice, yeah. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors, on the financial report? Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried. Thanks, Councillor Hoyt. We've arrived at item 13.2, which is the Tolga Historical Society lease application. Could I have a mover to open the report for discussion? Councillor Kaju is opening it for discussion. A seconder, please. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hayden, thank you. Councillor Kaju, would you like to talk?
Well, I don't support the report the way it's been presented. I don't know what has transpired between the society and council officers to this point to arrive at this, for our officers to put this report up. While I was a building CFO with council, I had some involvement with the society on some of their building projects. Now they want to put a new building at the northern end of the existing building that they've just recently erected, which is in the Rail Trail lease. While there's some complexities around that, I'm not sure whether all the alternatives have been looked at, especially the existing museum is located on council freehold land, I read this report. And some time ago, it was suggested that putting I believe that the society's got two old army buildings that would come in form. They've erected one and they still have another. And they were back from, I think, Vietnam Day, these buildings, and they were gifted to the society. So they've erected one on the rail trail sublease area. But the second one that they want to put up, and this is the nature of this report, I'm not sure what the restraints are with putting it on the freehold end as opposed to the rail trail lease. I believe that there were some issues regarding boundary setbacks, and I'm not 100% sure, but in my view, if council relaxed the boundary setbacks to allow that building to go on the freehold parcel, that would solve a lot of the issues I think that's been raised with putting it on the rail trail lease land, which is governed by the state. So to take the complexities out of it, it may be as easy as relaxing the boundary setbacks and allow that shed to be put on the freehold title. And then that gives council some security, if in the event that the society falls in the future. Having it on the freehold lot enables council to do certain things with it, what they will. Council can decide to do whatever they like with that lot and the buildings that are on it, if in the event that the society no longer exists. So that, I think, and I'm not sure what discussions have been taking place, but I think if that could be looked at and a boundary dispensation given, and if the shed can fit in that space on the freehold side, I think that would probably be a better option than trying to put it on the rail trail lease that's owned by the state and all sorts of complications that arise with that. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Councillor Cardew. Councillor Wills?
Yeah, just advising that I would like to submit an alternate motion in relation to this matter. And I do have something to say before I make that submission, if I can.
Yeah, Councillor Wills, you've got the floor at the moment.
Thank you.
We've opened it for discussion.
Thank you. The submission and the alternate motion, I have no doubt the committee won't be satisfied or content with the current outcome, and be the same for certain sections of the community, and probably for our elected members as well. There's been quite some discussion, quite some controversy over this, and numerous hours have been spent. I want to acknowledge the great work that has been done by the committee and the ongoing dedication that they have shown over many years. Accept the intent of the current proposal, but having in mind our current policies and the guidelines, the extension to the existing footprint just doesn't fit. I believe that the alternate motion is a compromise between council and the community. It is my intention to seek advice from legal and from the CEO when the time comes, if my motion gets a seconder. Substantially similar to that which was initially proposed, with a couple of differences that I would ask that Phil relate to and expand on. Shall I read it?
Yes, please, Ben.
Okay. That council, 1, refuse the application of the Tolga Historical Society Incorporated for a lease or licence over part of lot 14 SP identified as lease licence area D, not consent to the construction of an additional building on council controlled area, apply the exemption contained under section 236(3)(b)(2) of the Local Government Regulation 2012 to dispose of an interest in land without first offering the option for obtaining tenders, being a sublease in favour to the Tolga Historical Society Incorporated over that lot, sufficient to encompass existing improvements and generally in accordance with the terms as set out in Schedule 3 of the existing licence agreements. So basically, that they continue to operate under their current arrangements. And of course to delegate the power of the Chief Executive to obtain the necessary consents, negotiate and finalise the leases, and to do all things and sign all documents to give effect to this resolution. 4 is extremely similar, it's just a different subsection, and again it delegates the power to the Chief Executive Officer to finalise the negotiations.
Thanks, Councillor Wills. Councillors? Councillor Clifton.
Thanks, Mayor. Can I ask Phil and Mr. Turner and Councillor Wills, what have you had discussions about the potential changes with the community involved, with the Tolga, with the committee?
Yes, I have. Very briefly, And as I indicated right at the start, the committee aren't satisfied, nor are they happy with the current outcome. However, as I've said before, and from fairly intense discussions, I do believe that it is, at this point in time, a compromise between community needs and what current council policy and regulations dictate. The erection and subsequent acquisition of further assets is an impost on the general community. And in the event that the society at some point does no longer exist, well, it's additional buildings and assets that we inherit to our asset register. But I would ask Phil to elaborate further, please.
Thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, so if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'll provide a bit of background as to the policy or council's policy position in relation to this and why this one is a little bit of a complicated scenario, because it spans over a number of buildings, a number of agreements, and a couple of council changes in policy, and also shifts in council's asset management direction, and also that there's mixed tenure, so we're dealing with a freehold parcel, as Councillor Cardew pointed out, and also a part of the sublease of the rail trail, which council subleases off the state government. So it's a fairly complicated one, and I guess and somewhat challenging, I suppose, in terms of being able to accommodate the community group and still apply council's strategic direction in relation to its assets, as Councillor Wills has pointed out. So if I can, on page 175 of the report, we've identified all the various licence areas that have evolved over a number of years. That there's some improvements that have been constructed within those, and in some cases slightly outside of those, albeit we've obtained the approval of DTMR, so they were not so concerned. So what the purpose of this report, in addition to the request for the infrastructure, was to deal with the expired licence agreements and try and regularise the tenure arrangements over those existing facilities. I guess the additional land area request where the new building was proposed to be erected, I guess there's a couple of aspects to that. The first one was that the initial proposal was to include it on the, as Councillor Cardew pointed out, on the freehold parcel of land, and due to some planning overlays, the advice we received from our planners, or the advice that Tolga Historical Society received from the planners, was that it was unachievable to meet the relevant planning codes, and I believe it was to do with setbacks and potentially gross floor area as well. There was some limitation on that couldn't reasonably be achieved, so the suggestion was to look at getting an additional piece of land to lease. I guess what's transpired in the meantime is that council's adopted its community facility strategy, where it benchmarked its existing asset base, I suppose, or community facilities as its desired level of service. So anything that's new represents an increase in that service, and the tenure policy reflects that in saying that anything that's over and above council's desired level of service will be, I guess, charged at a higher rate, or will be provided less concession than our existing services. So that's the rationale behind the existing facilities, being afforded a greater discount on their licence fees, or preserve those licence fees, and it's purely in recognition of the fact that council strategy doesn't indicate that we want to acquire additional assets without some sort of considered approach and strategic planning around it. So, like I said, it's challenging in terms of trying to accommodate what the Tolga Historic Society are setting out to achieve. I think with Councillor Wilson's proposed changes, I think that is a compromise. I believe it is somewhat inconsistent with council's existing tenure policy, but it does reflect a continuation of the status quo of their existing facilities by retaining those existing conditions. And what I would suggest is, as you'd also note on the sketch plan indicating all the various licence areas that the society has been granted over time, is that we regularised the boundaries of those leases to encompass the existing improvements. So you'll note that the shed that's located in licence area B indicated on that plan extends beyond the existing licence area, so it would make sense to tidy that up and extend where the actual licence area is to encompass that building. And also there's another little shed that covers one of their wagons that's situated on the rail line, so it would make sense to extend it over that area as well. I guess to just one other point, if I can, Mr. Mayor, to round back to Councillor Cardew's point, and considering the planning application, I mean, that's something that we can revisit with the planners to see if there is, if it couldn't be decided at all, or if it was recommended for refusal. That's something that could be still considered, I suppose. That doesn't take away from the issue that it's still another asset, and it's inconsistent with where council's going with its community projects request process potentially. So it could be assessed under that process to whether we want to acquire additional assets. It doesn't detract from that, but the amended proposal would still, in terms of the area required for the leases, would still allow that us to explore that option or revisit that to see, get some more clarity as to why it couldn't be achieved under the planning overlays.
Thanks, Phil. We'll go Councillor Billman first.
Excuse me, through the chair. So the society which have requested additional storage area, and I see the need for them to store that in some respects. Has or is it possible that a container which could be taken away, it's not a fixed asset, be considered as a possible solution, a compromise on both sides? Would that be still considered an asset by council, which they'd have to depreciate it if it wasn't fixed, it's raised on, bricks or whatever, so that it can be easily taken away? Is that something that we could work towards? I know it's a bit unsightly, but maybe there's a beautification that can go around it to do it. I don't know. I'm just trying to find a solution that works for everyone.
Is that one you can answer?
Oh, look, in terms from a legal sense, whether it's a fixture is essentially the question. It depends on the level of annexation to the land is essentially what the law says. So as soon as you affix it to the land, generally it becomes attached to land. A shipping container by nature, I think, is mobile, so there is an argument you could say that it's an improvement. The general manager of infrastructure may have a view on, in terms of requirements for securing for cyclone regions and all those sorts of things. So out of necessity, I think there would need to be some sort of attachment. Writing into an agreement to have it removable is probably something that we could reasonably do. Again, whether that's something that council wants to see is shipping containers popping up all over the place is a matter for council. So.
But it's certainly a possibility. It's a consideration.
I mean, there's something we can write into agreement.
The second part of this, and I may flag a notice without motion because of it, this has got a bit of a history with our land tenure policy potentially not hitting the mark. It's caused a lot of work for the governance team. It's caused, in some cases, angst within the community. I think this is probably a good outcome, a compromise, as Councillor Wilkes has stated. I would like to see that land tenure policy come back to council for further work on it, because I don't believe it is hitting the intent. So I'm not sure whether I can do that, flag that now, or
we can raise that later on. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, you can flag it now. Councillor Clifton.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, would it be, Mr. Rhino, would it be appropriate to have our planner comment on the setback aspect, the planning aspect?
If he has enough background, but no. He's just shaking his head. So.
Yeah, look, I might just say a few words here. Look, the society is a highly motivated group. They're volunteers. They're providing an amazing service, and we appreciate everything that you do. But what's in front of council today is we've been asked to make two decisions. One decision is, should we extend the parcel that you're currently operating on to the north and allow an additional shed? And the other thing we're being asked to decide on is what financial arrangement will be in place so that you can continue your operation. So I think, as the Mayor representing all ratepayers, I do have some anxiety about extending the parcel further north and putting another shed, even though there's lots of resources that could be displayed in that shed. It's just that for council, there's a bit of anxiety that it's, we never really had a plan for this. It's just growing and growing and growing. We know that there's plans to change the main roads. We'll be changing the roads there at some point in the future, and that's a matter for them, of course. But we do have some anxiety about just the level of assets that are going to be built on this site. The capacity of the society to continue to maintain the level of service that they are maintaining, because it is a big task. But managing these facilities is quite onerous. We know what's involved up at the Purbeton Mining Museum. We know how much work that takes. So we sort of feel like, having had a discussion with Councillor Wilts early this morning, we sort of feel like today we're just dealing with the parcel to the north, which we don't think, if Councillor Wilts gets a seconder for his motion, we don't think it's the time for us to be expanding. However, we would like to help the society on the financial side of things, and maintain the current arrangement that you have. So that's I think where Councillor Wilts and I landed over the last few days and early this morning. So that's where things are at. Councillor Wilts?
Yeah, through the chair. Phil, the Mayor just mentioned the fees and charges and the financial. In the event that this is passed, what would the society be expected to contribute?
Through the chair, the effect of the reference to Schedule 3 of the existing licence agreement, which is basically that schedule in the existing agreement sets out the fees that you're talking about, so rates and charges. So the general rate currently isn't payable by the group. The group currently pays $165 per annum. So that was the arrangement under council's policy from 2015, or circa 2015. So we'd be looking, by virtue of that amendment, we'd be looking at extending that arrangement. So currently under the agreement, the water and sewage charges aren't included as applicable, because presumably that it's on a part, well, in terms of the rail trail, is on a broader parcel. So when those access charges, there may not be connections and those sorts of things. So they're not applicable under the Schedule 3, and essentially would be preserving the status quo, so that this Historic Society would be aware of what those charges are under the current arrangements. So.
Thank you.
Councillor Taji?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, is there any merit in leaving this on the table for the time being and exploring the setbacks options of granting a setback dispensation, allowing the society to put the building on a freehold title? That then gives council flexibility in the event that the society fails. Council owns that freehold land, and it'll be much easier to deal with those assets in any which way council sees fit. Again, in that same process, we need to talk to the society to see whether, putting it on the freehold title is still what they, or is acceptable to them, as opposed to putting it to the north of the existing. I think it'd be much better, cleaner, easier for everyone if it's put on the freehold title. I'd be proposing to leave this on the table, explore those options, and then bring the report back at a later date, deal with it.
Yeah. I'll just say one thing, Councillor Kaji. Look, an alternative view is that those things that you talk about, that they can still happen. What we're dealing with today is the parcel to the north and the fee arrangement, which is expired. So I think my suggestion would be that if Councillor Wilkes gets a seconder for his alternate motion, we proceed with that, because that way we've got the security of the society secure in terms of their fee arrangements, and then if there's other exploration to do around the freehold title area, well that can still be done.
Is that it with 2 years?
Yeah, that would fly in the face, I would think, of item 2. So
Have we added the words at this time?
yeah, at this point in time, that could cover that. If I can just to address Councillor Kaji's query, I think the stage that the Historic Society got to with planning was a pre-lodgement stage, so there was a discussion about whether it was worth their while lodging the application. So the idea of that was to not waste their time and money and energy on application fees, only to have it refused. There may be other proposals, planning proposals that may not have been explored, so that to the Mayor's point, that may be something that the Historic Society may be able to look at with the planners to see if there's other options from a planning point of view around boundaries and that sort of stuff. So.
Okay, Councillor Clifton.
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to second Councillor Wilson's new motion or amendment, because
All right, so Councillor Wills, are you happy to move that motion that's up on the screen?
Yeah, with that addition in point 2.
At this point in time,
yeah.
Yeah, and so Councillor Clifton is seconding that.
I am.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to talk to the motion that's up on the board? Councillor Clifton.
If I just wait, so I seconded on the understanding that passing that motion does not jeopardise the future ability of the society to continue to negotiate with respect to the planning setback matters, which seems to me to be a critical issue. Right. This resolves the matters that you referred to, the other block, but it doesn't close off the other avenues.
Yes, correct.
That's accurate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I can, just on that point that Councillor Clifton made, it doesn't know that there is another consideration, and that's the asset consideration as to whether council's agreeable to that. So as you're aware, there's a community projects request process which is designed to quantify, I guess, the additional cost to council. So that may be just something to keep in the back of your mind, that maybe it's running that process so the council goes in with its eyes open, understanding what the impacts are.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, those in favour of Councillor Wilt's motion up on the screen? Carried. Do you want that recorded? That's 5-1, Jackie, and Kev is again. break, councillor?
I was expecting Mr. Mayor, Mr. Councillor Hodge to bring one in for us.
I was going to bring one in, but you voted against me, so I didn't.
We'll take a 10-minute break, councillor, which you're used to that, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Okay. 10:20. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll reconvene. We're at 13.3, local laws approved inspection program. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilkes and Councillor Billney. Councillor Wilkes?
Yeah, fairly extensive report. To me, it just formalises what I submit is one of the essential aspects of what our local laws team do. And yeah, I think the report speaks for itself.
Thank you. Shirley, did you like to say anything? Or, no, only if there's a question. Yeah.
Question?
Any questions or comments, councillor? Councillor, question?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Shirley, I noticed all these 429 dog owners didn't renew their licences. Do we have I'm not sure, I probably should know, but do we have a follow-up to get them to pay, or do we?
Yes,
Yeah.
so through the chair, we do have to follow up to get them to pay, and if they don't pay, that's exactly why we need this AIP, because the officers can follow up through that as well.
So they actually know their dog's unlicensed, and they've got the reminder to say your dog's unlicensed, you better go and pay up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Councillors, Councillor Hodge?
Just one point that we spoke about the other day was the legislative requirement to do this. We just cannot go into someone's house and check to see if there's a dog. If you just let's quickly speak to that.
So through the chair, councillors, you're correct in what you're saying, councillor. This is a legislative requirement to have an approved inspection program. So every year, council generally has been coming to council a report to do an AIP program. We haven't over the past 2 years for various reasons. So we're picking that program back up. As you're aware, we have a significant issue with dogs at the moment. And this is one of the tools that will help us to bring that under control and reduce the risk within the community.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, we've got a mover and a seconder. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Thank you, Terry. Item 13.4, Herberton Mining Museum Strategy and Collection Policy. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Cardew and Councillor Hayden. Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. This has been developed in conjunction with the society, with the Herberton Mining Museum people. So, yeah, they seem to be happy with it, so, yeah.
Councillor Hayden and then Councillor Wills, huh?
Okay, so the volunteers at the Herberton Mining Centre work many hours contributing to the development of the strategy and the collection policy. This collection policy will provide guidance for future management of the collection, and I'm happy to endorse the board's recommendation as presented.
Councillor Wills?
Just about answered what I was going to put through the chair. If Gwyneth could give us just a quick overview, just for the benefit of the audience.
Very good.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair. This is the result of several years of work behind the scenes. I suppose it's a culmination of many years of growing that museum, striving to be more professional in the way the museum is run, and reflects a tremendous amount of effort by the volunteers who really are the driving force behind the success of that museum. So if we were to do anything else, we should acknowledge the efforts of the volunteers, who are very knowledgeable, committed and professional in the way they approach that museum. I know we've talked about Tolga Historical Society. All museums struggle for space, to store their collection, which is why we need to have a collection policy, because that will allow us to more tightly control items that we accept into the collection, and will also allow us to decommission items that we no longer feel meet the priorities of the collection policy. So it's good practice for a museum to have a collection policy going forward as the museum grows. And since the museum was accessed as being of national significance, it was a really good time and a trigger to have a look at the whole site and develop a strategy that will guide us going forward. So the strategy is not particularly aspirational. It was workshopped with the volunteers and with help from Queenstown Museum to be realistic and achievable, but to increase the professionalism and the way that we work with the volunteers on that site. So I think it's a really good document to oversee what our priorities will be going forward without necessarily committing council to a major significant additional investment in resources there.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Glenn. Councillor Billney.
Through the chair, if this strategy is endorsed, and noting that the Herberton mining centre, the contents are owned by TRC, maybe this might be able to guide the Tolga Historical Society on their potential collection policy as well. So it may have added benefits as well.
Good point. Councillors, we have a mover and a seconder. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. 13.5, TRC Age Friendly Strategy 2022 to 2027. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge and Councillor Wilts. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. As you'll notice, councillors, there has been exceptional consultation in this process, and it's a really great report that's come out. So what I'd like to do now is hand over to Christy, and see, we practiced this the other day. We'll let you. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, thanks, Christy. Thank you.
Through the chair, the Age Friendly Strategy sets a bit of a benchmark for the rest of Australia when it comes to being inclusive communities. We have a ageing demographic, which we're all aware of, and this is a collaboration between all our community organisations, TRC, volunteer organisations and government agencies. So we're very proud of it in the Inclusion Advisory Committee and also within community services. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Clifton.
More of a comment, Mr Mayor. Years ago I would have looked at the photographs of the people and he said they're all old people. Now I look and I feel the same. Can you do something about that? I think it's a wonderful outcome.
Conflict of interest there, Councillor Clifford.
Conflict of interest, yes.
All right, very good. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. 13.6, Youth Advisory Committee Annual Report. Do we have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Hodge and a seconder. Councillor Wilts. Councillor Hodge.
This is another great to see the report come to council from the Youth Advisory Committee, and it's great to see one of our youth here today. I'll get Christy to introduce her, and it's great to have you here. And it's a pleasure.
So through the chair, I'd first like to acknowledge yourself, Councillor Hodge, as the chair of the Youth Advisory Committee, and welcome and introduce Neil Motlap, who is here as representative of the committee from Mount Bernard, St Bernard's College, and been on our committee for over 12 months. So she is here to, I guess, represent the 12 months of hard work and dedication from the entire committee.
Fantastic. So Tanil, are you a student up there or do you work up there?
Student.
Student. Very good.
Oh, sorry.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for coming. Councillors? Councillors, any more? Okay, those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carol. Thirteen point seven, Reconciliation Action Advisory Committee. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Wilts. And a seconder, Councillor Cardew. Thank you. Councillor Wilts.
Yeah, as you know, I am quite involved with this initiative, and I just want to acknowledge Steve and the great work that he's done. And the Mayor and myself had the luxury of having a couple of lunches with the traditional elders and the seniors from our Shire, or from the southern area of the Shire. And we have met some, and I'm sure that we have forged some great relationships with the Indigenous community. And through this initiative, that continues to grow. But I'd just like to hand it over to Christy to give us a bit more.
Certainly. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge yourself, Councillor Wilts, as the chair, and introduce Steve Purcell, who may, if you do not know him, is a traditional owner and representative of the Southern Tablelands Traditional Owners Alliance, and has been a member on our committee for some time, along with Laurie Padmore and Kayleen Malthouse, as well as our First Nations staff. So the Reconciliation Action Advisory Committee guides Council on our efforts to progress reconciliation as a workforce and in our activities in community. We've been at the Innovate stage now for 2 years as a committee. In April, when we reviewed that, as we have done magnificently in progressing with 58 completed action items, but feel we would like another 2 years at this level to embed it into the organisation. Therefore, the recommendation to have a further 2 years at this stage. We can then assess and decide if we've progressed enough to then go to the next stage of stretch. So that's what we're seeking today.
Very good. Thanks very much. Yeah, look, I commend Councillor Wilts and Steve and everyone that's been involved on that. It's been a very good project for TRC, and certainly I'd just like to reiterate the CEO and I are very committed to keeping the momentum going and taking some real steps in moving this forward. So yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll try and continue to keep the momentum going. Thanks very much for everything.
If I could just briefly through the chair, just to acknowledge the great work done by Christy and the other associated officers, because as we know, without the continual driving, some of these things would fall over. So it's really pleasing to be part of this initiative, as I indicated earlier.
Thanks. Councillors? Yep. So we've got a mover and seconder of the officer's recommendation. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Thanks very much, Steve. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. 13.8, Wet Tropics Regional Resilience Strategy. Do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Councillor Billman. And seconder, Councillor Wilts. Councillor Billman.
Look, the report again is very expansive. I think it's important that we have a resilience strategy in the event of disaster. The author of the report should be commended. It's very encompassing, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions for Shirley? Councillor Clifton.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, not a question.
Yep. Okay.
I, as a councillor, applaud these sorts of things. Yesterday, Councillor Cardew and I attended the Barron Catchment Care meeting, and we became aware as I've known for some time, that there are many disparate groups working all over the place, doing with much the same general aim in mind. And it seemed, in agreement with those people and ourselves, that there needed to be some effort to bring all these groups together. And so I applaud our resilience strategy, but I do think we need to think a little bit in a way to bring all these various groups into a coherent framework, so we don't have over there, over here, over there, over there. The Barron Catchment Care Committee as a group indicated that a consultant had drawn a wet tropics management plan in relation to water, but and dealt with everything in relation to water except they were questioned about the water quality. They said, oh, that doesn't belong to us, that belongs to the Department of Environment. And more than anything, it indicated the differences and we need and have to be aware of that, I think. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Shirley?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Clifton. I know Sarah Dean, the author of this report, is very much aware of networking and making sure she's collaborating across the not-for-profit sectors and state government sectors as well. I do want to flag that the action plan isn't tabled. It will be going to the leadership in the first instance to review the actions, and then that will come back to council, and that's why this is a receive and note report.
Very good, thank you. Okay, councillors, those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Carried, thank you. Item 14.1, notice of motion, Councillor Clifton, planning delegations. Do we have Councillor Clifton, would you like to move? Yeah, Councillor Clifton's moving, do we have a seconder? Councillor Cardew? Councillor Clifton.
For the benefit, I guess, of the audience, both online and here, I'll read it out. What's on that the delegations of the Chief Executive Officer in respect of the Planning Act be amended to reflect the following: any application for material change of use to be determined by council. Secondly, any application for reconfiguring a lot that involves the creation of 5 lots or more will be determined by council. And 3, any application or concurrent agency referral that's proposed to be refused by council officers is determined by council. The effect of this motion, if it's successful, is to withdraw delegations that have been duly and properly given to council officers, withdraw them back to this council chamber so that they're decided and discussed and argued about here in an open forum. That's not to suggest that what we've been doing now we've been making our decisions completely in accordance with the rules, in a completely transparent way, with respect to the rules that we're required to follow, and been making sound and sensible decisions. There's no reflection upon any of our past processes, but I have been left with a feeling that that in the general way of things, the community would want to see the matters that were really important to them discussed in an open forum and go backwards and forwards, have the ability and have the ability to listen to that and to respond to that. The second thing I think is really, really important is that we are experiencing very strong growth in our region. I think the Mayor released a press release the other day which showed that our gross regional product was had increased significantly. Over the last year, we've approved many new lots of land. As we know, building is going on. Tolga's flying, Molanda's beginning to fly. There's a lot there which doesn't readily make itself available. When I say readily, make itself available into the press unless you go through looking for it. So my feeling here is that our residents expect that these decisions should be made directly by council. I don't, on the other hand, I don't want to impose a significant workload upon or delay the process of these sorts of applications. And I note that for the financial year 21-22, with respect to the material change of use decisions, there have been 22 in this current year since the 1st of July. So that's not an onerous amount of. I also note that reconfiguration of lots, there's only been 10 decisions there, and there have been 2 concurrent agency referral for refusal applications. So in all so far, this would increase the council workload by 34 applications over the period of a typical year, because we're getting towards the end of this year. That doesn't seem onerous, and I have consulted with council officers about it and sent this motion to them and received commentary from them. The only potential problem I do foresee is a delay in the process. I'm not entirely sure of the exact timeframes that council officers and council's required to respond, but I think there is a possibility, because we only have a meeting once every 4 weeks, that a development application might fall inappropriately and might have to go out a little bit further. Although I do understand at the moment that council officers have advised some planners that they're on a 6 or 8 week time frame. So that could be a difficulty that that might occur, which I think we ought to be able to, as it does occur, deal with it according to the circumstances and deal with it by the development of sort of administrative procedures to add on to what we already do now. So I commend it to you as a way of enhancing our transparency. Having said that, we are completely transparent already. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor. Councillor Hodge?
Yeah, I fully support the recommendation from Councillor Clifton. Many councillors have actually standing committees on planning and finance. And of course, if in timing, if it was a significant application and it needed to be dealt with, well, we can just always call a special meeting, just like we do with contracts and those sorts of things. So I can't see a problem whatsoever. So I fully support it. I feel that I was elected to make the decisions, and these are very, very important decisions, planning decisions made by council. They're very important. And I must say to councillors that, of course, you still got to do your homework. You just can't wait for an application to land on your lap and make a decision. You still need to go and find out what's going on. It's all on the website, so you need to do your homework as well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hodge. Councillor Billman.
Through the chair. I understand the reason behind Councillor Clifton's motion, and that being transparency in the decision making of council, as well as for the public's benefit. I do note that currently council puts all of its code and impact accessible applications on its website, and we also receive monthly reports that informs us what is being assessed or decisions being made on planning applications. I too have concerns with the additional workloads that may result from the motion if endorsed, and similarly those potential delays in the decision-making process whilst awaiting for council meetings. So they are some of the concerns that I've had to ponder as well.
Thank you, Councillor Billman. Councillors? Look, my 2 bobs worth here. I did mention to Councillor Clifton earlier today that I did have some concerns. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things we've always talking about with council, you know, things take so long. And from what I've seen here, council through its current delegations is actually dealing with these things in the quickest way it can. If we recall this duty back to elected officers, elected people to make these decisions, it is more work and it will take more time. So if we look at those figures provided there, roughly there'll be 3 more reports to each meeting. You know, if there's 34 applications, if that's indicative of a normal year, it's almost 3 per meeting. We only have 12 meetings a year. So that, you know, that sounds like, it sounds to me like we're actually going to slow the process down a bit, because my understanding is that we haven't got a problem with the quality of the decisions that have been made. The quality of the decisions have been made. We're satisfied with the quality of the decisions. So the quality of the decisions aren't a problem. It's just that it's the openness and public awareness of when these decisions are made in a delegated way, which appears to be the problem. So I mean, I think my concern is that the Councillor Clifton's recommendations don't directly deal with the problem. The problem is about making sure the community knows that these decisions have been made. So it seems like it can be done this way. Councillor Clifton's right, we can do it this way. Things will come to the meeting, they'll be seen, they'll be heard, but I think we are slowing the process down. Slowing the process down, asking officers to do more work, even though they're saying it's not that much. It's another 34 reports a year to council, for the council meeting. But look, they're my thoughts. I'm happy to go with the view of fellow councillors, wherever the numbers fall. But yeah, I just don't. I'm not fully across the line. I'm not across the line on this one with respect. I respect Councillor Clifton's view, but that was just my view. Councillor Wills.
Yeah, through the chair, just a bit of an observation. If you weren't involved in the process, we are not planners and we're not engineers. The information that we would be relying on to come about decisions in a meeting would be through the information that is given to us by the people that are in those positions to provide that information. And that information would be used for them to form their original decision on that planning application. So I think it's something that, yep, I would like to see it more transparent to us as elected members as well, because it is somewhat embarrassing for people to stop us on the street or wherever we are and say, hey, listen, what's going on such and such, and we don't know. And whether that's through our ignorance or not, it would be good for those major ones, as Councillor Clifton has indicated partially in his recommendation or in his in the summary of his desires, that it would be good to have that knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wills. Councillor Cardew.
Okay, thanks, mate. Look, I fully support this, Councillor Clifton's recommendation. Having worked in this space for a very long time, the timeframes and things are there. Our planning applications seem to take a lot of time. I don't think, well, but the time that they've used, by the time they get to the report stage, a lot of time's already been expired. We're only talking about the time it takes for that report to get to a council meeting. And as Councillor Hodges has already alerted to, if there is something significant there that requires a decision before a council meeting can be had, we can always call a special meeting without any problems whatsoever to deal with that. So I don't think the timing is an issue. The workload, I don't think is an issue either. I think the planners have got to do what they've got to do regardless whether it comes to council or not. They still have to do their reports, they still got to do their checkings, they've still got to assess the application in its entirety. So that work's already, that has to be done regardless. The bit about officers having delegated authority to refuse applications or the like doesn't sit very well with me at all. I think any refusal of anything, whether it's a planning application or anything else, really needs to come from council, because we're the ones that have to deal with the consequences arising from that. So I fully support it. I think, to be fair and open and transparent, like Councillor Clifton has said, I think we need to do that. And I think that this is a very important matter, and we need to be able to, the general public and our constituents need to be fully informed. And I think they've put their trust into us to make decisions, and the planning decisions are very important decisions, like it's already been highlighted. Planning matters matter to everyone. So, and I think us as elected representatives from our community need to be making those decisions, especially in this space, as opposed to delegated authority.
Thanks, Councillor. We'll go to Councillor Wilkes and then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, just I can't agree with Councillor Cardew in respect of that we have to make the decision to whether or not an application should be refused. Again, as I said, look, I'm not an engineer, nor am I a planner, and I think that decision should be made by the people that have that knowledge. If we are the elected representatives of the community and we have to bring back to our constituents the information that has given rise to a correct decision being made on an application, and I don't think that we have the expertise to go down that line at all. Yeah, that's my view.
We'll go to Mark and then we'll go to Councillor.
Just a little bit more information, potentially on the information that we provided out of the meeting to all the councillors in relation to the impact. And I do note that obviously between the time that we were aware of this motion and this meeting, there hasn't been a lot of time, but I've had some further conversations with the planning team. There is a slight additional workload on the team, well, it's probably not slight, in actually compiling the reports to council, because when the officers make the decision, they go through the assessment process, but don't necessarily write everything in the format of a report to council, which we would need to do to properly inform the council as to what the background and the reasoning for the decision is. That will increase the workload for the planning officers to some extent, and it will, with similar resources, will result in an increased focus on making sure that we meet regulatory timeframes and requirements, which will come at the detriment of the services that we provide that are not we're not regulatory obligated to do, including pre-lodgement assessments and things like that, which are basically an additional service. So there will be an impact. The other matter is the time frame. So yes, special meetings are an option. However, again, special meetings are often called with very little notice, and we want to make sure that the councillors have the ability and the time prior to the council meeting to make informed decisions and actually digest all the material. If in some cases, and I would suggest that that might actually occur quite a lot, we would need to seek approval from the applicant to provide an extension on the decision-making period. And if they don't do that, and we can't get it to council in time, depending on the type of decision, it will be most likely a deemed approval with standard conditions that are set by the state. Those conditions are often not advantageous for council and or the developer, and we will then result in negotiated decision notices, which will be separate reports to council.
It's my point of order. The point of order is that I think Mr. Biss is overstepping the mark, arguing the case as opposed to giving objective information.
I'm just providing information. So.
Well, all right. I'll leave it to the mayor to decide the point of order.
Look, I think I've been listening quite closely, and you know, the general manager is talking directly about the detail. I think that's reasonable what he said. I mean, we need to know.
Your judgment.
We actually need to know what happens.
Well, I have a document here for him 3 days ago, which refers to none of that, which says the additional workload to report authors is minimal. In his words, 3 days ago.
Yeah, but it also...
And the second thing I'd like to say, if I just counter it, this was not a short-term thing. I put this motion on the table directly after the last meeting. If the processes, and I made it available to the CEO, if the processes in our organisation are such that you didn't get to see it to the last minute, it's not something that's relevant here in terms of making a decision. I need to make those points quite strongly. If you didn't look at it, that would be your choice. If you didn't see it, that could be something wrong with the administrative systems. Am I right, Mr. CEO, in saying that I gave it to you and you said to me that this is that's all right, I don't mind if you put it forward?
That's correct.
Right, so that's background to it, Mr. Mayor. That's why I think that there's a difference of view in our administration that's being led extensively in one direction after the additional workload to report authors is minimal. That's your note to me 4 days ago.
That's correct, and I've started my conversation by saying that I've received additional information that changes that view slightly from officers. Yep. So I've said what I thought was important information for council to have make their decision. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, just one point. I'll probably have to go to the planners on this, but when an application comes in, once it's formally made, right? We have, is it 45 days, Paul? Or what are the days?
It's through the chair. Councillors, it's 35 business days to make a decision on that application.
Yep.
If there's no confirmation notice, that's within 10 business days.
Yep.
And then if there's no information request or referrals to the state agencies.
So you have that time frame, right? You know when the council meetings are on. So unless it's exceptional circumstances, it should be, unless it's really technical, which you would ask for the extension. And even now, there's two applications outstanding now that our officers have asked for an extension of time. So it does happen. So, but on most times, they should be able to get that application to a council meeting for a decision. So it's not that we have hundreds of them. We have some complex ones, but there's not hundreds of them. So I just can't see a point in time. I can't see a time. That's all. And I think really I'd like to move the procedural motion that the vote be put.
So can we, Councillor Hodge is moving the procedural motion. We'll vote on that. If the vote is put, Councillor Hodge is moving that. We don't need a seconder. So we'll vote on that. That the motion be put, which is Councillor Clifton's motion. That the motion be put. Did you vote?
Hang on, can I
The
just
motion.
clarify?
Well,
This is not his motion, it's just that it gets put to the vote. There's no more discussion, basically.
Oh, well,
Mr. Mayor, if I may just make a comment, the effect of moving, can't make a comment? No.
Make a procedural motion. It's voted on, that's that.
What was the outcome? Sorry, I
So-
couldn't see all the
You haven't
hands.
voted on it.
Yeah, we did vote on it. Councillor Cardew was voting.
I'm still unclear where we're at the moment.
We're having a vote which will determine if we go straight to councillor Clifton's motion to decide that. So we're voting to go straight to councillor Clifton's notice of motion to decide that without any further discussion. So that's 6-1, yep. So that's passed. Yep, so councillor Clifton's motion has been moved. Were you asking a question?
Well, does that, it relates to that motion. Under normal circumstances of debate, Mayor, the mover of the motion gets the last chance to affirm his case. Have I been denied that now?
Well, I guess
Yes,
the
I have.
judge's motion, that's right.
Yeah, can't say anymore. That's why.
Okay. All right, so procedural motion has passed. So we now vote on councillor Clifton's motion, which was moved by councillor Clifton and seconded by councillor Cardew. Those in favour of councillor Clifton's motion? That's defeated. (14.2). Notice of motion, councillor Clifton, Agricultural Advisory Committee terms of reference. Councillor Clifton, would you like to move that motion?
I'll so move.
Do we have a seconder for councillor Cardew? Councillor Clifton.
Thanks, Mayor. I draw councillors back to a luncheon we had with previous members of older councillors, retired councillors. We had a lunch here maybe 6 months ago. It was obvious around the room, most of those councillors, many of them, were agriculturalists, and they were retired agriculturalists. And at the time they were on the council, they would have been active and in the agricultural industry. Today, as you look around our council, we don't have any such people except Councillor Cardew, who is a beef producer and a property owner up in the Evelyn Tablelands. That occurred to me that things have changed. I thought a bit further, and I thought, what sort of relationship do we actually have with the sector that provides the majority of the gross regional product on some of the richest country in Australia? And my conclusion was, that's my conclusion, that we didn't have any relationship other than to take their rates and to do some work on their roads. And it seemed to me to be a significant omission in terms of relationships, that time and circumstance had changed what was once a strong relationship into a situation where there was little or no relationship. Hence, the establishment of the Agricultural Advisory Committee, which would be established as a legal local government committee, which would had the obligation to provide advice to council and create a situation where council would have a voice in the agricultural industry. I put it forward for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clifton. Councillor Cardew.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I support this. I think the agricultural industry in our state government DRC footprint is one of the major lifeblood of our industry, of our shire. I mean, economically, when the farmers have got money in their pocket, everybody else does as well. So I fully support this. The only thing I'd ask the mover, Councillor Clifton, to change in his motion, I'd like to see Councillor Clifton as the chair of this committee. I mean, he's put all this hard work, he's done a lot of hard work putting all this together, and I'd like to see him being confirmed as the chair of this committee that gets up as opposed to himself. Happy to support in any way and happy to be the councillor member if that's the way it goes. But I think Councillor Clifton should be the chair.
This is a question of procedure, Mr Mayor. You should first establish the committee and then appoint a chair. That's all. Rather than deal with it as one three-part motion.
Councillor Billman.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, I actually agree that this is a really good motion. Has real merit. The only thing that I would like to say is maybe who's on the committee. It may be we should be voting on who wants to be on it rather than just appointing. We don't know everyone's expertise in certain areas, so it may end up that those councillors that are nominated in this motion end up being on it. But shouldn't we be giving all of council the opportunity to raise the benefits of what they might add?
Yeah.
And further to that, I think the executive manager of economic development should also be on this committee.
Okay, so thanks, Councillor Billman. So we've got a few things to deal with there, perhaps to tidy the motion up. So Councillor Clifton, with your endorsement, are we able to perhaps include the Executive Manager of Economic Development? I'm not sure if that should be in the resolution, but
they would want to be part of the committee, but just the person that predominantly supports it.
Yeah, I would be happy with that, but I left it out, Mr Mayor, because I thought that the nomination of such a person would be an operational matter, not a policy matter.
Yeah, good.
So, with respect to that point.
Yeah, well, so we need to, perhaps Councillor Clifton, with your endorsement, we need to ascertain if there's other councillors that may have an interest of not being the chair, but being part of the committee, as Councillor Billman was suggesting.
Well, I would just, if I may, say, from what the CEO just said, Mr Mayor, is that we probably shouldn't be nominating people, anybody there.
Yeah.
Under the rules of the establishment of these committees, the chair is required to be a councillor. So we could also take those names out, and then it could be decided at a different time.
Yeah, okay.
I'm happy with those amendments.
It's just a question of the machinery, but really, once the committee exists, you can appoint a chair. Until the committee exists, that wouldn't ordinarily appoint a chair.
Yeah. So coming to you, Councillor Hayden, we'll just tidy up what's there. So endorse the terms of reference for the Agricultural Industry Committee. So do we need the bottom two dot points? What we need to do.
At the moment, we just need to deal with point one. Then you will need to appoint members, the council members, and the council member would be a chair. Well, there's no prohibition on doing it today. Just until you've got a committee, you can't really appoint a chair. That's all. It's only dealing with part one of the motion separately. That's all it is.
Whatever you think.
Yeah. So can we remove two and four, please, Jackie? Councillor Clifton, are you happy with?
Yes, I am, Mr Mayor.
Being pared down that motion. So we had, so councillor Clifton and councillor Cardew, are you happy with the change, councillor Cardew?
Yeah.
Yep. So perhaps that's all we need to do today, is just to deal with that. So those in favour of councillor Clifton's, sorry. Oh, sorry, Annette, sorry.
So, point of clarification, we have an economic development officer that I think could be going around asking the agricultural industry, because I've actually spoke to a few that Mr. Clifton, Councillor Clifton talked to, and they said, oh, it's all well and good, but we're too busy, and the last time we had our meetings, it went nowhere. So to me, I don't know if they are overly interested in getting too involved, and they are very busy people. So to me, we do have Angela, who is our economic development officer, who maybe could contact some of these people, suggested people that may like to ask them if they're interested in forming this committee.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, I think that is an operational matter in terms of which officer gets involved, but yeah, I know that he has had those engagements. Councillor Clifton?
Yes, just to assist Councillor Hayden, when I prepared this document in conjunction with our Economic Development Officer, he made amendments to it. I asked him whether he thought, and I also at the same time asked to see if he thought it was a good idea. They both concurred, and I offered for Angelo to lead it as a document, and he said, no, I'm happy the way it is. So that's an extra context. He has had considerable discussion with a number of people in the district at quite high levels as well as at ordinary working levels. I'm sorry that he's not here to support it. I didn't think that he would be required, but perhaps the CEO could confirm that.
No, he's been engaging with industry. Whether industry ultimately, Councillor Hayden supports it or not, it will be a test. I'm aware of the point that you make, that previously these things have not been overly successful.
Okay, councillors, we have Councillor Clifton's motion is moved and seconded. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
If you wish to appoint the councillors to it now, or at some point in the future,
Councillor Clifton, would you like to appoint councillors to the committee now?
I think so, yeah.
I would have thought.
Yeah, okay.
Why not do it?
Yep. So yeah, councillor.
If we're going to appoint now, I'd like to appoint Councillor Clifton as the chair.
Yep.
Or nominate, sorry.
Nominate, yep. Yeah, do we have any other nominations for the chair of the committee? No? You have one, I think. Do we need to vote on it? Okay. Councillor Cardew, would you like to move the motion that we appoint Councillor Clifton as the chair?
Yeah, I'll move that motion.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilts, seconded. Those in favour? Carried.
Congratulations, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you,
and the member. Yes.
For other members.
Okay. And we'll also call for nominations for other members of the advisory committee. Councillor Gilman.
Just noting other committees that we have, advisory committees, there's generally one councillor and a proxy.
Yeah.
So are we going outside our normal by having two councillors?
Yeah, look, I'll have to take advice on that. I'm not sure myself.
We come down to the terms of reference for the individual committee.
Just
it's
going,
ordinarily one, but I think each committee is able to be decided in respect of that committee. There's no blanket prohibition of
the policy does.
my colleague on my far left, there's nothing that we've got, no policy or anything that I'm not aware of, General Manager, that would prohibit the appointment of more than one councillor.
The policy of which we just endorsed actually just speaks about one councillor. That's all I'm saying, just to tidy that up.
The terms of reference.
Yeah, the terms of reference.
Oh, yeah. Where does it say that, councillor?
I'm just looking myself.
It doesn't, it says the committee is chaired, 6.3, the committee is chaired by a TRC councillor, what they're doing. Members of the committee may include any persons with an interest in the development and carriage of agricultural activity throughout the region.
I don't see any barriers within the wording there in part 6 membership to appointing one more councillor. Seek to have 2 councillors there.
Councillor Kaji.
Thanks, Mayor. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but on any of the advisory committees, I thought any councillor could attend any advisory committee meeting at any time. Is that not the case?
You can attend and observe, but not participate.
Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, to move things on, I'll move that Councillor Kaji be appointed as a councillor to the committee.
Councillor. Second. So we've got a move Councillor Hodge, seconded Councillor Clifton, that Councillor Kaji be appointed as a member to the advisory committee. Those in favour? Carried. Well done.
So are we going to have more than one, or we want more?
No, anybody else can go anyway.
Otherwise, I'd like to move Councillor Milner to be on it as well.
Councillor Billy, would you be happy to accept that?
Yes, I guess.
Strong view.
No.
Keep your enemies close.
It's being on the committee for the right reasons is what I.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may, well, the reason I've asked or nominated Councillor Bellamy is that he's already on a number of agricultural type committees. I think his input would be very much appreciated.
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Kaji's nomination of Councillor Billman? Councillor Wilkes is seconding. Those in favour? Carried. Do we have any?
That's it. I haven't got a degree in agricultural science, so I don't want to.
All right.
Okay. All of the council one at a time.
I'm having all.
All right. Okay. I think we're done with that one now. So we come to item 16.1, which is business without notice. Sorry, business without notice. Councillor Billman.
Yeah, as I alluded to earlier in the meeting, I would like to have a motion without notice that officers bring the land tenure policy back to council for discussion so that it provides future direction to officers of council's intent. Now, this is just to make sure that we are hitting the right marks with community organisations and tenure agreements and pricing. If it ends up that it stays the same, well, so be it. But I think it's prudent now to reassess that policy.
Thanks, Councillor Billman. Yeah, and look, I concur. I think this is we've certainly struggled in this space, and we need to sit down and go through it again with officers on. I think. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Billman's motion? There we go. Councillor Wilkes is seconding that. Any further discussion on this one? Those in favour of Councillor Billman's motion? Carried. Thank you. Wish they were all that easy. Yeah. All right. So now we reach confidential. Yeah, so we need to ask.
Just before we do that, Mr. Mayor, could I just acknowledge that this is Paul and John sitting there in the front row their last meeting, and from me for what you've done in my time here. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciated what you brought to the table over your years of service with TRC, and we wish you both well in your new endeavours.
in my former life, if you were going on holidays and changing jobs, you had to shout. Is that relevant here?
Former
life, like you said. Okay.
All right. So we're going into confidential. Can we have a mover? Councillor Hodge, moving that we go into confidential. Councillor Clifton, second. Those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Is anyone waiting outside? Amanda, do you know? Okay, item 16.1, Waste Services Business Strategy Stage 1 Implementation. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Sorry. Sorry.
Someone has to move it.
A mover, please. Councillor Wilts is moving. Councillor Hodge is seconding. And those in favour of the officer's recommendation? Thank you. Carried. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to an end to our June meeting. However, we do have a special meeting next Thursday, the 30th of June, to adopt our budget. So until next week, meeting closed. Thank you.